E.J. Jack McGinn of 4661 Danbury in Okemos, Michigan, 48864. Jack's phone number is area code 517-349-6622. Jack also maintains an address in Florida at 3809 Fishing Trail, Sarasota, Florida, 34235. Phone number is area code 813-371-5312. The recording was made by Jim Walkinshaw at the Oldsmobile History Center on October 20th, 1989. This is tape number 1 of 3 tapes. Why don't you start, Jack, with your name, rank, and serial number, so to speak.
This is Jack McGinn. I retired in 1983. It's getting difficult to remember. Yes. And I have 2 addresses. I have a northern address, which is 4661 Danbury, Danbury, Okemos, Mich, 48864, and my phone number there is 349-6622.
Right.
And then my southern address is in Sarasota, Florida. It's 3809 Fishing Trail, Sarasota, Florida, 34235. And the phone number there is 371-5312.
What's the area code down there?
And it's 813 area code in Florida.
Good.
I'm usually in Florida from 1st of November till the 1st of May, and up here the rest of the year.
Why don't you just take us back when you started at Oldsmobile?
Yeah. Okay. Well, going back, this goes back to 1946. It was actually in December of 1945 when I hired into Oldsmobile as an hourly person. I had been on salary in Turnstead's in Detroit before the war and gotten a leave of absence there and worked in the accounting department, but there was no opportunity to get in there for a long period of time, and they were hiring hourly at Oldsmobile, so I hired in December. But there was a strike going on. It lasted until the 1st of March, 1946. I think I hired in about the first week in December of 1945.
Right during the strike?
During the strike, they were hiring. And they told us to go home, and they would call us if and when the strike ended. And it ended 3 months later. And I was called when they went to they put a second shift on throughout the plant in car assembly and also all supporting areas in March. And I was hired in March 15th or 17th of 1946. I came in with about 200 other people, and they split us out into different groups. And I happened to end up in the group that was to go to Mike Minnow, who was superintendent of the car assembly plant. And I reported in on the second shift in the middle of March. When I got to the assembly plant, the assembly plant was not running at all. In fact, they were just starting the shift at that time, and we, along with some of the other people that had been working there, were transferred to the second shift to get it going. So I was taken up and given to Bert Kassler, who was my foreman on the front end assembly. And my first job was to put in a radiator cover around the radiator, and also several screws that held the radiator in. This was on the second floor of building 16. And we were on little islands. It was the fixture that you build up the front end assembly on was on a little circular island that had that 4 or 5 people could stand on, and the island moved, being towed by a chain, and there was like oh gosh, I don't know, maybe 30 of those islands in a circle, and they would go around until the front end was completed, and then the hoist operator would pick the front end off and drop it down through a hole to the assembly downstairs. So so we got a free ride on the little carrier that carried us around. We hired everyone was just out of the service and really was rambunctious. They'd been taking orders for a long period of time, and they were not interested in being too disciplined as far as work was concerned. And out of that group that hired in, I hired in, I think there was about 20 of us hired in. There was only 2 of us that stayed at Oldsmobile, that retired from Oldsmobile, myself and one other individual out of that 20. When we started that line, and it started to work very slowly, the attitude of a lot of the people certainly wasn't the type of attitude you wanted to have to be good workmen. And it was a difficult group to work with. And Bert had a lot of trouble making people do their job or getting them to want to do their job. I can remember very well that coming around to my area, I was the second last one in the sequence of the circle that went to the front end drop, and a repair coming around there in such high quantities that we were always holding the assembly just before the front end drop, and thereby holding the final assembly downstairs to get some of the repair done. So it wasn't long till Mike Minow appeared on the scene after we had had a chance to work out bugs for a week or two, and we were continually holding up production, that he appeared on the scene and went through quite a demonstration of what he thought was motivation, and told Bert if he's going to give him 10 minutes to stop and get this all caught up, and if he stopped it again, Bert would probably be looking for a job. Oh yeah, there was no question about it. So everyone went back, and Bert was an easy guy to work for. It was quite an interesting experience that I had on looking at managerial styles, because Bert was a nice guy. You couldn't meet a nicer guy, and he listened to everyone and tried to satisfy everybody, and would try to take an explanation for everyone that wasn't doing their job. Just a heck of a nice guy. And when you put everybody back in position, and knowing that your supervisor was in a critical position and recognizing he was a heck of a good guy, you'd think everyone would have tried to keep up, but they didn't. They went right back to their old horsing around ways, and within a period of time we were back with stopping the line downstairs, and Minow came upstairs, and Bert disappeared, and we didn't have a supervisor for about a day, and then Ted Ostrom appeared on the scene. Ted was a completely different type of individual, because he knew a troubled area. Well, he came around and made it perfectly clear that everybody better start doing their job, or they'd have him to deal with. And in fact, he made it very strong to everyone. I kind of resented it because I did my job, and I had a bad feeling towards Ted when I first started. But I understood that later on, because each individual tested him, and he stepped up to the window, and if someone wasn't doing his job, he took some kind of action to make him understand they were getting paid to complete a job. If the job was too much, he'd try to correct it. If it wasn't, he would expected him to do it all the time. Well, really, in essence, Ted turned that thing around. There's a lot of people rolled through that department, and it was quite a lesson in managerial styles that I learned very quickly when I came to Oldsmobile as an hourly person, that looking up at a supervisor, what made things work and what didn't make things work, or how you handle yourself.
Were most of the people, Jack, one or the other of those kind in that time frame?
You mean the supervisors?
Yes. Were most of the supervisors more one way than the other?
The supervisor, a supervisor has to have a white mix of what he is. He's got to be a good guy to some people and a bad guy to other guys, because people respond to different types of styles. And see, Bert's problem was he's a good guy to everybody, and some of those guys he should have got him by the collar and shaken him up and made him do a job. Yeah. And I know one day, even after Ted got there, we were working short work weeks. Price controls were on. Okay. And at that time, that's what the company gave as the reason that we couldn't get material. We, I don't think in 4 or 5 months we worked a 40-hour week. We were really? Constantly out of. Many times I drove from Carson City. That's where I lived, and I drove down here many days for 4 hours. We'd go home in 4 hours. Many weeks we only worked 16 hours. Ooh. And that it all tied in as explained that the price controls was the thing that was holding it up. I'm not sure how that works, or but that was the thing that was. But anyhow, they took the price controls off short time after that, and it did seem to correct the problem, because we started going. But I think it was like 7 or 8 months before we got a 40-hour week. But then we started going 40 hours consistently. And there was many episodes back there. I know I went, most everybody in that area went across to the Region. Most people knew about the Region Cafe and Milo's, because everybody rush over there to dinner or to lunch and eat it in 15 minutes, then rush back. But I went over with some of this original 20 or 25 that hired in way back at the beginning, and they all decided they weren't going to go back. And I was the only one out of the group that went back. There was about 8 of us that went over, and 1 came back, and that was me. And mainly I came back because I was married and had a kid. So
these guys were just going to quit, so to speak?
They just quit. And jobs were plentiful at that time.
Yeah.
So, and it was at the end of the Bert Kassler area and the early Ted Ostrom area. Yeah. And they could get another job, and even then they had, you could go out and get this unemployment. When you got discharged from the service, you had for a year of unemployment compensation. Oh, I didn't realize. And yeah, you got out of the service, you got 2 things. You got a bonus sometime within that first year, and then you had unemployment compensation for, I believe it was extended for 52 weeks. I think we had a whole year of it. So the guys were working sometimes for 2 days a week or 3 4-hour days, and the unemployment compensation was almost the same. So after a couple of beers over there, 8 out of the majority of them didn't go back. So it's caused much confusion. And a lot of that ironed out as we got into a 40-hour week. The people that weren't going to stay usually didn't stay the first 2 weeks, and then the ones that stayed stuck around.
Do you remember, Jeff, what you were making?
We were making 46, or let's say 60. It was 66, 76, and 98 were the models. Okay. You had a 66, the bottom of the line, an 88 in between lines, and 98 was the top of our line.
They were all going down the same line?
They were all going down the same line.
Okay.
And I remember in 1947, I bought my first car. It was a 1947 66. And that was a very proud day. I bought my first car. And it was the first new car I had. And a year later, I bought the car for $1,400, I remember. And after a year I had it, I could sell it for $2,000. Because at that time, the availability of cars were were scarce. The cars were scarce. And the first car I had, I made $600 on, which was, gee whiz, that's about 80% profit. Or something. But do
you remember what your salary was, Jack?
I was on hourly at that time. I mean, I made $1. It was right around $1 an hour. But of course, you paid for all your benefits. You paid for your Blue Cross, and
you paid for all of that.
Yeah, you paid for all that. I paid for all my Blue Cross.
Did you get any bonuses or those kinds of things?
No, there's no
cost in that kind of stuff.
I'm trying to remember. I don't think there was. I don't think they even cost. I think it was strictly $1 an hour.
All right. And was there anything for incentive like?
There's no incentives. No incentives at all. No, and then of course you didn't have short work week, or if you the first week you were laid off, or first 2 weeks, I don't remember. You didn't get unemployment for the first week or second week, so it wasn't.
You just had to make it.
It was early on, but $1 an hour was really good because you could buy. See, that's 1,400 hours that it would take to buy a car.
Yeah.
And right now, today, it'll take more than 1,400 hours to buy probably the same type of car. Yeah. And gas was 5 gallons for $1 and so forth. So it really was a fairly good wage at that time. So after a while on the front end assembly, there was so much turnover, and I was one of the few people that stuck around there. I eventually. Other people came in. I remember Dave Odom. Dave Odom came in and worked with me at that time on hourly. He worked on one side of the line, and I worked on the other side. There were other salary people. I can't think right now who they were, but there's quite a few of those people that did stay. Sure. Ended up in some kind of a pretty decent job. Later on, there was you had what they had is what they called a P-hole that went through the line. It was like a 7-car break. There was and you didn't get relief. You only had relief for emergency, and you took your relief as that P-hole. It started at the beginning of the frame line, the beginning of the body line, and it would go on through. Okay. It would take 2.5 hours to go through. So relief men were very few because they only were supposed to take care of emergencies. And so I got a job about a year later, or a year and a half later, of being a relief man. Ted Ostrom was an interesting individual. He was very, he expected a full job out of everyone, and was very good at balancing the job out. But he could beat the standards so well that he always had 2 or 3 lieutenants around doing his job. And I think he had probably a group leader, an assistant group leader, and a couple of relief men. And standards department wasn't too sharp at that time. You could sort of have a couple extras on your payroll. And I eventually, by being relief man, then I was repairman for a while, and then eventually I got to be a utility man, which was like an assistant supervisor. I'd make out we would take care of any of the breakdowns and all the problems, and it was, and you did get into the paperwork. So I'd make out the timesheets and so forth. and you got into some of the forward planning, when they talk about next year's model. For several years, the only thing that changed was the molding on the side, so really there wasn't any planning. I remember ran into Fred McClone, showed up in that area one day, and he was the methods engineer. He says, "I'm a methods engineer," and we all wondered what that was. But so we had, at that time, his first job, I remember, was there was under the headlights there was an opening for air, and it had a big long hose that went clear up to the heater. And those things were monsters to handle. It's a great big, they're 5 feet long and 5 inches in diameter. So Fred made that was his job, was to get some kind of a good handling process from the carton to the people, so we could take out some of the inefficiencies there.
Was there much mechanization at that time, Jack?
There was, no, you had your air tool, and that's really,
Little fixtures?
little fixtures, like, when you put the fenders together, you laid a scoring fixture in that plugged into gauge holes and the fenders and the core supports, so that opening would be, fit the hood, yeah. But there wasn't a lot of fixtures. There was a lot of stitching. You had stitching equipment where you'd stitch rubbers on the fillers and on the fenders. An awful lot of flapper-like things that would probably stop the splashing, so forth. But anyhow, I was sort of group leader at that time, and sort of served in that kind of a job for a couple of years. I was group leader, and Dave was one of the relief men. So as there was a significant change as far as process there came up. Instead of having the merry-go-round or having this round conveyor that pulled these individual islands scraping on the floor around there, they decided they were going to have have a fixture mounted on the floor, and there'd be 3 of them side by side, and a hoist would come over and pick it up and put it on a big wide belt conveyor that would take the whole assembly down to a straight line, in which the headlights and all the paraphernalia, radiator, would be assembled. And they had, so that was part of the planning that Dave and I was in. And they had a universal, they come up with a universal fixture that would fit all 3 models. And I remember we tried that. We tried to assemble it in the time sequence. You had 3 minutes because you had to go on the conveyor in 3s, and we were going 60 an hour. Yeah. And we could not make it in 3 minutes. And we were sure we were positive, no matter what, it wasn't going to work. And Duke Osborne was the process engineer at that time. I don't know how in the world he got into process, but he was the fellow that made the fixtures and said it'll work. And so when we started up, it came out the way you couldn't get one off and one on, and we couldn't keep up. Yeah. So it wasn't just a short time. They went out to Freelands where they'd thrown those old fixtures we'd taken off the merry-go-rounds and brought them back, and we had to build them. We had 3 specific fixures, and then one could be sitting there while another one was being built. It didn't have to be wait until your turn. You'd lose a minute about getting it on and off the conveyor. So that was an interesting part of my life, was how important that planning was, and how important it was for the people that were making the decisions to be aware of what the hourly guy was sure it wasn't going to work, yet the person making the decision wasn't listening to us, and it proved out to his demise because he lost his job over that. But that after we did that process worked. We put them on a belt conveyor, and then we had the long single knife edge type of conveyor that we set the fenders on, and then it moved sideways down through the system, and people could stand on the back and work on the back and the front at the same time. And You could raise or lower the platforms people were standing on to try to get better work heights and so forth. And that worked out quite well. And after Ted was in that area during that next 2 years, we were really a good department.
That still was all in Building 16.
That's still in Building 16, the second floor of 16. Another thing that we had a lot, though, that one of the things that are important that Ted did have, we had an awful lot of things we did together. We had softball teams. We had all kinds of social events outside the work that sort of melted us in as a unit, which was I recognize as a good technique of building teamwork.
Both the salary and hourly folks come.
Oh yeah, salary hourly. We had played. We had a very good softball team. In fact, I was a pitcher and Dave was the catcher. In fact, we won our division one time. We played up in Ithaca. We went around to the towns around the area. So, but that was sort of a melting together of all of the people that didn't play would come out. All of the women and kids and everybody would show up. It was really kind of a small town, pre-television type of activity, which was basically a good thing for a community or a group. Long about that time, they had not had any new supervisors on salary, put on salary, because they had all the old timers that had been there and then the ones that went to the service that came back. So it was about 3 years later, probably 46, 40, 49. They were going to be losing a couple people downstairs, and so they decided they would, education and training had a pre-foreman testing thing. And so they decided, with the recommendations of your general supervisor, so anyhow, myself and Leonard Hicks, out of the whole assembly plant, was 2 people that they decided to take this test. And the test was a monstrous thing. I think we were 4 days in there.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
We just took test after test, and a lot of it was psychological testing, supposedly, where do you like raindrops on the roof? And I didn't really know whether I was supposed to like raindrops on the roof or not. But I was convinced that I didn't do well in the test. But anyhow, after it was over, whatever they had for a grade, I did pass it, and Leonard Hicks also passed it, and so that put myself and Leonard on a course where you could be considered as a supervisory replacement, but after they exhausted everyone else. So we continued, let's see, that's about 47, 49. And about 49, it was about 49 that Carl Jahaki, who was a well-known supervisor, decided he would go to Arlington, Texas, and take it. They wanted him to go down there to take a job. Well, so they had a big party for him, and they put me down in his place. It was on the final line, the beginning of the final line, where let's see, it was before sheet metal, but it was where all the body bolts and steering column and the body is attached to the chassis. It's the first group after the body drop.
You didn't have the body drop itself.
I didn't have the body drop. The body drop was up in 16. The one line ended, the chassis line ended after the body drop. After the body was dropped on the chassis, the car or the chassis with the body rolled off the end, and over in the next bay to the right was another line, and we had to move them manually with a transporter, and they also had chains that they'd hook one to the other to pull it over to the other one. Mm-hmm. But there was a manual move from one line to the other, and I started. They weren't lined up. They were out of, well, there was offices and a bunch of things down here. So we had to, it came here and we'd have to move it over here. And and they'd push it up to the beginning of the line, and you'd tie a short chain on it, and it would pull itself on the line if the wheels were lined up. If it didn't, it'd pull it into the pit. But that was then after the chain was such, so when it was hooked on the car ahead of it, and it got it on the, there was a center, there's a pit underneath, but the conveyor was in the center of the line. It was a dog on it that came up behind the rear differential and pushed the car along.
Middle of the pit?
It was in the middle of the pit. Oh yeah, okay, it was horrible. Anyone working in the pit had to work on one side of that line or the other, and it was only, it wasn't very wide, yeah, about a foot and a half wide. And then you had to put a tool up there, and then of course, like gas tanks or anything, you had to be real gymnastic, using gymnastics to get the up in there, because you had to go up and then over the line and then thread the neck up in there. It was, but when you hooked the car up to the chain, it would pull it up. So when the next dog came up, it would fit that dog. Then you had a person that would step on the chain, pull the car ahead and unhook it, go take it, throw it in the, throw in the container and go back to the other one.
Yeah.
This was a different area for me, and I went in there not as a supervisor, which was a little tough, and not as anyone really knowing what a group leader was, to run that department. And it was a tough department. You had body bulls and body wopses, and it was you're marrying a lot of things together. Also, you set linkage and steering gears, and we built bumpers for both of the lines. So it was a testing time for me, because I was not a supervisor. So I was going in an area that probably somebody there thought they should be running it rather than me. So it was a tough area. Well, Joe Pablet was one of my relief men, and Bob Rolfe was a relief man. Both of them later on became supervisors. But I get off.
Okay.
But anyhow, I worked in that department quite a while, and
How many guys did you have working for you?
well, there's around 35.
35.
Yeah.
Did you have any women at that time?
Yeah, we had women in both places. There was women up at the in the assembly area. In fact, it was interesting back up in the assembly line area. That was interesting. When I was putting the shrouds on, a man from the department of or somebody from the state that had to do with blind people came in, and with Bob Stone, and was looking to replace a blind person. And they looked at this job of the person that sub-assembled this part for me, and they wanted to know if they could put a blind person on there, and they did put a blind person on there. And the company was working with the state to try to place so many blind people or physical handicapped people in the plant. So that was interesting combination and the person never missed work, and they didn't have any problem keeping up. And they were as they got acquainted with the job, their balance time was no more than anybody else's. They were carrying the same load everybody else was. So.
Was that a thing that we tried to do a lot of after the war then, John?
They was this person that worked for the state after, he was constantly looking for places. Obviously, personnel, someone in the plant that had the capacity to do it allowed him to come in and look at our jobs any place. He seemed to work through the safety department.
Okay.
And would look at all our jobs and encourage us if we had jobs to try to place them. And in fact, it was not only blind. We got into, we had several deaf people that come in about that time, and then also ones that were deaf and couldn't speak. There was 2 or 3 came in. There seemed to be a lot of interest in doing that. It amazed me that they would even try to do that. I thought it was quite complimentary to whoever thought it could work out. And a lot of it was tied in with this individual that worked for the state who was partially blind himself. He was very dedicated to it. And then he'd stay there day after day to help that person.
Really?
He says, I don't want you to give me any extra help. He says, we said, we're gonna make that person pay off for you just as well as anybody else. So it really did a good job.
Oh, that's interesting.
So there was that person happened to be a woman, and there were other women in the front end assembly. And when I went down to this place I just mentioned, that after the body job, we built sub-assembled bumpers there, and those were all women that sub-assembled bumpers. And they riveted, most of it was riveted together at that time. They had these big riveting machines.
Were they restricted to certain tasks at that time, or?
No, a woman could do any job that you felt if you had a small person, you put a small person on. Whatever you used, looking at her physically, they did just about any type of job. And then where you had the small screws or you had to use, they did a very good job. In fact, some of them did, some of those jobs that they did were very hard to relieve when I had to relieve them. So there was no, but I think, I'm trying to remember, I think those people they were really left over from the war effort.
Oh, all right.
They were not hired in.
Okay.
They were all brought in during the war, and they had the right to continue on a job after we started it up, and as jobs became available that they and we felt they could do, they were put on the jobs. And I think about this time, everyone that wanted a job could have a job, and so that was really no problem. It wasn't too long. I was in this job about 5 months, and Jahaki came back from Arlington, and here I thought all of a sudden I found myself going back upstairs in an area where they had put another group leader, and I was sort of excess baggage at that time, and but in fact, I was even loaned to the engine plant for a couple of weeks at that time, actually working an inspection over there, just putting gauges and holes, and I felt very down at that time, wondering what was going to happen to me. But the fact that I had passed the test, and that was a requirement to be considered for salary, and no one else had passed it, it did keep me on in the light of a potential replacement for salary. But I'm trying to remember what time we moved over to 75.
That must have been 49.
49. We moved in 48. When they moved the engine and transmission area, the transmission area was to put transmissions on engines in the engine plant at that time.
Oh, they did.
And before then, we'd get the engine from the engine plant on trailers with the transmission on. So before, as we moved into building 75, one of the first moves was to have the big engine delivery conveyor put from the engine plant over to the assembly plant. And the transmission was put on in building 75. That was really the first thing that went in building 75, and it existed there a year before anything else came over.
Okay.
So, I was very instrumental. I worked in that area there quite a lot, setting that up. In fact, I eventually ran that for a period of time until in the original setting up of it. Then when the rest of the plant came over, the motor dress-up line went on the second floor, and the chassis line was on the first floor. But the motors from the transmission area in the first floor of building 75 went up to the second floor, 75, and then there was a long engine dress line there. And after that was a steering column line after the engine dress line, where we built up steering columns. About 2 months before we were to start the model over there. What model?
49.
49 model. But 2 months before we were to start that model over there, I was told that I was going to be put on supervision and I would be running the engine dress-up line and the steering column line, which I had never been there and knew anything about. So, but they kept me. I never really got into the dress-up line to learn the process. I had to learn it by coming in early in the morning or late at night. And then it was also evident when I was really afraid of going on supervision because all these guys had been on it forever, and I thought, geez, they must have some insight that I didn't have. And come to find out, I spent a lot of time in product engineering trying to get prints. There was absolutely nothing available to the supervisor. So I went to product engineering and I pulled all the prints that I could as a big blue prints, and at that time, let's see, at that time they were starting this. What do you call it? In the body group, there was a fella upstairs that was drawing three-dimensional pictures.
Oh, okay, the graphics of
the graphic department up there.
Yeah.
And somehow I went through that one day, and they were doing it almost for service more so than the plant. And I thought, what a super idea! Why couldn't we get some of that stuff? And that wasn't available at that time. They had one man working up there, and I guess I should remember his name, and I can't because Jantz.
Oh yeah, Freddie Jantz.
Freddie Jantz.
Yeah.
And Fred was working up there by himself and just drawing these things mainly to go to service installations out in the field.
Yeah.
And so when I was still not a supervisor, but I was asking him, gosh, could you do that to the engine? I said, and he said, well, he didn't have time and so forth, but so he did. I said, well, there's 2 or 3 parts that I wish we could get you to do. And I talked to George Jones, and they drew 2 or 3 things for me, just for me, for that I took off this big old print, and they put the part numbers and everything on. That they did. I'm telling you, it was terrible. The only way you did was you didn't have any methods engineer. See, they really hadn't up until that point had a major change. Year after year was the same fender. You put on 2 moldings or something, and you'd find out how to put the moldings. Now when we went over there, this was a major change, instrument panel change, and it was. So the only access you had was to go to product and go into the build-up area and get as much experience, although that was when we first learned out about the experimental build-up, which later on we lived there all the time, early on.
Did guys go over there like you did?
So I know I had all my information, and just about a week before we started, then there was some adjustment that I wasn't on the steering column. I didn't know whether we should make it after you set the chassis on the body and get it all together, because it would change. And I went down and talked to a couple of the supervisors down there, and come to find out I had more information than anybody in the plant. They really were amazed at what I had. And so it was, they'd been over to product a couple of times, but they didn't have, it was a terrible startup. We just had, we had all kinds of problems. You didn't have the broadcast at that time. You had things come down the line and would say Group 1 on it, and Group 1 would carry certain accessories, certain colors. And I spent my whole time prior to converting, putting a handwritten chart on each area saying number 1 minute means something, number 2 means something, and so forth. That was the first year that they grouped accessories too, where you could buy them a person could go into the dealership and he could get a group of assessors.
Yeah.
And by doing that, it appeared on the screen. Well, we finally we had a very we had repair was horrible downstairs. We had lots of repair, and there's thousands of cars in the yard and so forth, and it was obvious why it was. But then Bud Hoffman was the first guy. He was running the he was working on the manifest thing, and he came up and said, well, we got a couple extra boxes in there, and I said, well, why can't we put a number in there with the last part number? Why? And he suggested, but we got together and we did about 4 of those on the motor dress-up line that year, and it worked so well. That was really the first time we ever got anything on the teletype. Well, or that was the first. Wait a minute. Now that was the first year we had the new type of teletype. Prior to that, we had the thing that it wrote on. You had, I'm not sure the correct, in body receiving, the person in body receiving wrote longhand all the accessories on a piece of paper, and at the same time, out in all the areas that are scheduling areas, this little pen would write the same thing on a piece of paper that would rotate up, and that was
the early system?
That was a system that worked until we put in this system. Bud Hoffman was working on that system. We put in the computers. That was on a computer. But the old, and it was so terrible because each time he would write something, he'd have to go back and put his ink or his pen in where the ink was, and that would make all these satellite places put the ink pen in there, and then it would write. If he'd missed that, he wouldn't write. And it was, we had many, that was, that system broke down constantly, and sometimes you couldn't read his writing, and you'd interpret it 2 for a 4 or an 8 or something, and so it was, and we were concerned about this new system, but this new system was such a wonderful step up from what we had there.
The teletype, was that kind of the first blush at this scheduling sort of thing?
The teletype now this conversation that Bud and I had was really before the system came in. Now I remember Bud indicated there was like there was 4 or 5 empty boxes. And he wanted to know if there was some things he could put in there. And he did. He put in several things where the operator would look up and it would say fan pulleys, and he'd look up and see a Y in there, and he'd look at his box or the last number of the part number. That last number of the part number, what it was. We hadn't gone to alpha at that time, but he. And so I think the total amount on there. Well, it got rid of the 1, 2, 3, 4, where everybody had to interpret what group number 1 meant. You can imagine putting a new man on the job. He looks at number 1. Well, and then 98. If it was 98, it took certain accessories, and because they were standard on them. The 66 didn't have that, so you'd go strictly to the group, but you couldn't look at the number all the time because the series carried some accessories. It was just unbelievable.
And when you were out in Building 16, you didn't have any of that kind of stuff at all.
Well, that was still on the old teletype.
That was on the teletype.
That was on her. I wonder. I can't remember what that's so long that I can't remember the proper name of that.
That was on the pen thing?
It was on the pen thing. We didn't get the new thing till we moved over to the new plant.
All right.
And so this was, and then we also found later on we could make blow-ups of that, but that was quite a while later. We didn't get blow-ups later. But so we started on the motor dress-up line. That was my area of responsibility, and I didn't know that much about it, but I really crammed. We had 3 weeks down to start up, and I really crammed to between product, and I spent more time in the plant during 3 weeks than I ever spent in my life, because it was so amazing how little we knew and how little was available, and you had to pry it out of everybody.
Yeah.
And but like I said, you only had what you got. There was nothing.
You would
in
never...
fact, systems engineers, Jerry Klinger was working on the body hardware line that long about that time as a methods guy, and I was trying to think, I can't even remember that I had a methods guy at that time. I think it was at that 49.
Yeah.
It was, now we had quite a disastrous startup, and I know at that time afterwards, after we got going and they tried to analyze why we had so many problems, I remember Mooney was down at some level, probably down his job, and it was Baltimore, someplace in the east, had a system that broadcast more, and they used the broadcast fully, and they had they had a manual, a name manual. They had a manual that each foreman had.
Yeah.
So that was the year following that. We and that analysis of all the problems was evident that we needed all kinds of help, because this was going to be the thing of the future. We were going to have major changes from then on, and it wasn't something that one guy could do by himself.
Yeah.
So the methods engineer and the broadcast people out of reliability and the all these various, and your process people, your plant layout people, all started to come together, and they were all developing, and so we went along that year. I had to depend mainly on my repair and relief men to help me out as far as running the thing, because they were more knowledgeable of the things that go wrong when you run it. I knew quite a lot about the information, but they really helped, as they always did, help out the supervisor. So we finally got going there, and started to run a fairly decent department there, because each month somebody came up with a new and better way of helping the informational flow to the person. Getting the information in the person's head was the real problem. At that same time, we at the first person on the line was the person that we had a board with a piece of paper, and so we had one person reading the manifest, and any interpretation for all the people down the line. She expanded the manifest to take care of decision-making process down the line. She did what eventually the computer would do. And so that's the first thing I learned. We better put that on one person and have two talented, than have everybody trying to guess it. And also at that time we started what later on became that PRIDE system. We indoctrinated everyone that they not only were hired to do the job, physically do the job, but they were hired to do it right. And if they didn't do it right, it was their responsibility to identify anything that wasn't completely up to standard as far as completely doing their work load. And we provided everyone with a method of identifying any substandard work so that it would not get out of the department, that it would be identified, that a person down the line that could correct those defects wouldn't have to go over the complete car. He could see two jobs up the line that he was going to have an exhaust pipe that had a problem with it, that had a strip knot on it. So that worked so effectively in there that I was thoroughly impressed with that as something we could eventually do all over, because it wasn't being done all over.
What did PRIDE stand for?
Personal responsibility and defect elimination. So and we changed it to discrepancy. Later on, they said we don't have defects, we have discrepancies. So, But at that time, it had no name. When I was doing it,
Okay.
it only developed later on, when everyone felt you needed some kind of a gimmick or a program or something to make things work, and the ZD thing developed in the engine plant. And well, you need something in an assembly plant, but that was later on because I was at a higher level and could do something. But I was in that job. Let's see, how the heck did that work? From there, from there they took me down in repair. The repair was never getting done. They run repair around the clock, 7 days a week. Paint was running, mechanical was running, and come up and asked me one day. He says, "This thing's running pretty good." He says, "Why don't you come down and repair?" He said, "Would you like to go down and repair?" And I don't know anything about that thing. I don't want to go down there. That's it. And about a week later, my general foreman told me I was being transferred to the repair system down in repair, and that was a interesting system. As I went down in the repair system after the test rolls, there was all kinds of inspection of the car, and then items would be written up, and then you had a long straight line that people worked on, bagmen worked on. They were called bagmen because they had a bag of tools, and they'd get into the car after it was completely inspected and put their bag of tools on the car and ride the car down the conveyor until they got it done, and then go back and get another. It was about 10 or 12 of those people. After it got to the end of the line, if there was still repair, then it would go to hole repair, and that's where I was. I was in hole repair, and I think we had like 24 holes. We had pits, and we had motor repair areas. But there was no way you could handle a lot of cars through that system. It was a whole system where you had to back the car out and move it. So you had drivers doing that. I don't know how old I was, but I was awfully young compared to everybody. And the only person that went to repair was a person that had been they got there by seniority, and there was everybody was 30 years older than I was. And they were quite a diverse, different types of people. But I remember the day I got down there, a guy came up and he said, "Hey kid," he says, "if this thing runs pretty good down here, you aren't going to have to do a hell of a lot." But he said, "If you want any information on how this runs, come over and see me." So that was a guy, and I was concerned then that there was going to be very little. It was going to be a problem to make any changes. Everyone was a specialist down there. If a car had 5 different things on it, maybe electrical, front end alignment, or some different sheet metal. Each guy, even water leaks. I even had a guy that all the water leaks went to, and a water leak. So the cars were going from hole to hole down there, not repairing anything. If a guy had a heavy repair, he could get it out of his hole by saying it had to go to electrical first. I constantly looked at the cards saying electrical first, and so forth. So they were playing a game down there. It was horrible, and it was almost a helpless situation because they were your only resource you had, and you had to do with what you had there.
Yeah.
So I kind of just looked at the system for a period of time, trying to learn all I could learn about how things run, and but then I didn't want to disrupt too many things until I had enough people on my side, because the worst thing you could do would be to disturb that thing, and you just had nothing done. So I called Duke one day and I said, I want 3 brand new guys young guys off the line up there and I'd like to talk to them first and have them come down. And so they sent 3 down. They sent Bob Fox, Whitey Horseman, and Harvey Loudge. And I talked to all three of them first, and I told them our problem. I told them I was going to make some changes that people weren't putting out. They had a standard time for everything you did down there, and that I wanted those guys to help me change that. And so I put them along with three other people that were kind of in the middle. They were good people and could understand if I talked to them how the thing wasn't working. So I had about 6 people or 7 people that were really working with me before I started to change things. And we started to say when a car goes in your hole, you fix it and it doesn't move. And
You fix all of it.
you're going to be a hole repairman and draw the rate of a hole repairman. What you don't know will teach you. And there was a couple of exceptions I made to start with was the steering gear changes and the front end, changing front springs or anything to do with alignment, because there was some quality things and some safety things that I didn't want to have everybody doing at that time, because most of the other things you could look at, check to see whether they were done correctly. But this was a traumatic thing that, but I did have six people out of the 12 to 14 people on my side before I started that. And then I, as people bitched, I did take them in the room and I'd talk to them. And usually the bitches were really the problems. They were the ones that were not carrying the load, and especially the guy that come up, and I'll never forget him. He was putting out about 3 cars a day and doing nothing, and he was the guy who wanted to help me. I'll never forget. Yeah, big help. But I did understand those people were people that had a lot of seniority. They had families. They had things to do, and I wasn't going to kill them.
Of G.J. Jack McGinn. Jack lives at 4661 Danbury in Okemos, Michigan, or at 3809 Fishing Trail in Sarasota, Florida. This recording was made by Jim Walkinshaw at the Oldsmobile History Center on October 20th, 1989. This is tape number 2 of 3 tapes.
And we really didn't want to. It was a management created problem, and most problems that I have seen through my life, when I go in there, it's usually management created it, and by taking it out on the people in there, you're not really addressing the problem. Where you should try to bend over backwards to get it turned around, because they're a result of probably bad management. But anyhow, we did work with a lot of the people. There was a lot of them that weren't producing anything at all. In fact, they could, the cars go in and out of their hole, but they were just changing it, moving them to other bays, because it was a way when the car went in the hole, you could get rid of it.
Yeah.
So, but this worked. It didn't. It started to work, and the 3 guys. Then we had another fellow by the name of, he was a Dewberry, is a southern guy from Alabama, and he came down there, but he was a good mechanic, and he came down as a 4th guy, and those 4 guys got on my side. I pepped them up, told them all the things we could do to turn this around, and so pretty soon these guys were whipping cars out of there. What I did is I started to record out of each hole. I kept a record on my desk, above my desk. The driver that took a car out of the hole put a chicken track showing that this guy had finished a car. And I didn't let him put down the car if it wasn't finished. If it wasn't completely bought, they got no chicken track. So so I started paying more attention to that chart showing performance, and And some of these guys were putting cars out. They were, gosh, where we were changing fenders in 2.5 hours. They were changing fenders in 45 minutes.
Oh,
They finally, we really got some enthusiasm, and then we'd go around, and I kept a running thing, so it would show your better performers and so forth. So everybody started to look at that. I didn't really say that much about it or put a lot of pressure on it. But it being visible and them knowing it was there, it was all you needed. So the people I brought down really turned it around for me. We turned it around. We got we got repair down. So we were completing repair. It took us 6 months. Keep completing repair on line time and going on with the line. We even had holes in the repair hole down the road, but it had been, but along with that, there was many things going on in there. It was, my God, we were repairing people's car, VIP's car. Somebody had called from the front office, and I remember one guy, personnel, called me one day, and he says, "I'm bringing a car over, and I want you to put a new bumper on it and turn the speedo back." And I said, "Well, we don't do any of that." And I says, he says, "Well, I'll get Minnow." He says, "He'll call you in a minute and you'll do it." And so I called Minnow first of all, and I said, "You put me down here to clean this up. And one of the major things is we're getting cars in here, personal cars in here, with license plates on. And first of all, they're stealing. And second of all, they taking my time away, and I want right now from you to tell me, are you going to cut that out or are you going to keep it on?" It was interesting because I was fairly, it really irritated me. I had all these guys working their rear end off, and then some people thinking that I should be doing that. So there's nothing Minnow could say. I mean, he could not say, he couldn't say it. So we eliminated all cars coming in there of any kind. There was even some supervisor's car. In fact, there's a supervisor right now that is very high, working in General Motors right now, that was one of the first guys I caught in there. And he was a tech student at the time, and when I found that in there, I was so mad that a guy trying to learn to be a supervisor did that I made him put them all back on himself, or take them off. He worked for 3 days on overtime trying to get his car straightened out. But later on, I paid for that. Anyhow, that was part of their major problem down there, was we just wasn't managed. So we got out of that. Another thing that we stopped was we were buying spark plugs down there by the gross, and they were available to about everybody and all over Oldsmobile. So we locked up all the parts. I locked up all the parts, and I assigned a fella that had disability that couldn't work. He was out drawing comp. I brought him in, and he was an ornery old son of a gun, and everybody will remember him because I told him, I don't want any part to go out of this. We wired the whole thing in, all the parts. I don't want anything to go out of here unless it goes on a car. And boy, he did it. He just loved to. So our scrap account and parts account got so damn black, we had cut it in about 70% out of it. But those habits down there. So really, from that point on, we kept up on repair. But it wasn't only the fact that you were doing that, you could have never done that. It was the thing that was really helping us too, was the fact that all this information was being made available to the operator. We started board planning things. We started our e-manual was started. We had our MAP meetings. You remember MAP meetings where a couple months prior you sit down on a layout of your department, and you put in every operator, put in every part number, and they kept track of part numbers. That when we got through with all these meetings, if there's any part number that wasn't assigned, we knew we'd missed it, and we picked up a lot that we would have missed. So there was some really some good things being done. Also, at the same time, we were well along about that time. We got running good, well in repair, and I got transferred over to the final assembly line of sheet metal drop.
Okay.
And
how fast was the line going in those times? Do you remember?
oh, the line that line. See, we were hitting. We were on one shift. We were in the hundreds an hour at that time. We were building. We actually we averaged 111 cars an hour for 8 or 9 hours.
Oh yeah.
The line was running 114, and we were averaging 111.
Wow.
And Fisher Body couldn't go that fast, so they were on 2 shifts and we were on 1 shift.
Oh, all right.
They ran, so we accumulated bodies at night, and we'd run that body drop all the way down to the last car during the day, and then it'd fill up. So we saved a lot of money by afternoon premium, and we were really doing a good job as far as, and with all the new things going on as far as helping the operator, it finally dawned on everybody that you can design this perfect car, and if all the effort goes into that end and you don't put it together right, you've done nothing. So they've finally realized it was important to training and development of information for the individual closest to the guy that does the job. And,
Jack, when you first went out as a foreman, did you get any training at all, or was it just what you did on your own?
I didn't get any. Well, see, I was really the first one that ever was put on. The people prior to that built back before the war, and there was hardly any changes, you know. And not any. There was no accessories. See, it was accessories were put on at the dealers.
Oh.
See, that's another point that I had forgotten. When I was in the front end assembly line, they didn't put radios. They didn't put windshield washers. They didn't put all your accessories were put on at the dealers.
Oh.
And it was in 1947 on the second floor of 75. On the second floor, they had body hardware line, and then in the 16 on down, they had the front end assembly. Well, up in way up in body, what would that be? That was on up
into building 20 and up there.
Yeah, building 20.
Yeah,
building 20. They put in what they called an accessory line, and they put all the accessories on the car. They put the radios in for the first time. Okay. They put air. I don't think air conditioning was available, but whatever. Any accessories you bought were put on up there. So that. So
the car you were building just before and after the war was a very simple vehicle.
The car before the war had no accessories on it. They didn't. The fender carried over for many years. It was such a simple thing. And then these people went into the after the war, and as you develop more sophistication as far as merchandising the car and making put more things on it. And designing more changes as far as instrument panel. Every year you change something. Really, the informational flow had not caught up with that. That was really lagging. And so really that first year when I went on as a supervisor, I was not given anything. It was just unbelievable. I thought there was some secret way that these people were finding this out. But when I go down and say, well, do you want to, how you going to adjust this down after the body drop? I said, just what? And they said, I don't even know what it is. So it was,
wonder we made it.
But see, that should have been done by us. There's, you can't blame anybody but yourself if you don't get what you want.
True.
And and that was even later on, it used to be a famous saying is that, well, nobody told me about that. And that used to be something that just turned me red. I just felt that we gave everybody access to go to product engineering anytime they wanted. And it was everybody's responsibility. A big part of responsibility was learn before you go down what you're going to build. But anyhow, I was made, I've been transferred out of repair over to the front end assembly, but I was only there not too long a period of time when I ended up, they needed a general foreman. And so I was made a general foreman. And I remember where I was put. I think I was up on, I think I had the upstairs. But at those times, during that period of time, let's see, that would be early 50s. Production went up and down. We'd change line speeds maybe 5 times a year. We'd start out, start out at 100 an hour, and then you go down to 90, then 80 and 70, and we were constantly putting people on salary and taking them off. I went on as a general foreman, then back to a foreman, and then on as a general foreman, then back to a foreman, I think 3 times. I went from foreman back to hourly once too. And so during, it was quite, the schedules really, we couldn't keep the Lansing plant running. And obviously we weren't selling enough cars. They were taking some of the swing at the Lansing plant too. I think there were some GMD plants. I don't know what year GMD plants.
First one, 1930 something.
30, yeah.
We were.
So they were taking a lot of your schedule change in Lansing because GMAD, if any misabuse they took, didn't come in through our own organization. They went to Detroit and came back. So if they were hit too often with schedule changes, they'd say, well, we've got quality problems because you guys keep changing. So the easiest thing was to change was our own plan because we couldn't really complain because we worked for the general manager.
But it was just as big a pain to us.
Oh, it was the thing about our Lansing plan too was we built every car.
Yeah.
We built, you eventually went to the F-85,
right.
And so forth. You had the 66, 76, 86, you had the station wagon, and then all promotional cars like that they'd have, like the Indy 500 or any special car they'd build in Lansing. So we had all the cars. But anyhow, after a couple of years as general foreman, let's see, that's getting, what year is that getting up to? It's we were 49, 50, 51.
Must be somewhere in the mid-50s.
We're about the mid-50s. Yeah, well, and we kind of buzzed along there as a general foreman, on and off as foreman, general foreman, 50s. I know I was back as a foreman in 58, and that was the year we had the
that was that terrible year.
That was the air ride.
Yeah.
Air ride.
Yeah.
Come in that year.
Yeah, I remember that.
And, but they decided to put air ride on the car. That was a major mistake. So there was they just decided they'd put one manufacturing guy. Dick Hill was the methods guy.
Okay.
And he asked for me to join him. And then Paul Munty and were students then. There was just, see who was the other guy, Paul Munty. And there was another fellow in the product now that were students that we went over to product and we tried to devise a way. There was copper wires hanging all over. It just looked like a plumber's nightmare. There was, you had all 4 wheels, had 2 lines running to the central control to all 4 wheels, and then you had it going up into the dash. It was just a maze of pipes. And, but this was really, and Dick Hill kind of pulled it together. They saw this coming, so they gave us a frame over in product engineering, and we bent all those pipes and we put them right where we wanted. It was really a good exercise in planning. We got rid of a lot, but what we did, we made that unit so it could be built up on a fixture and dropped as a complete unit on the frame rather than build it. We had a frame upstairs, and we run the pipes over the frames, and so we decided we'd never hang those pipes all over the frame, all over the plant. So we built this fixture, and put all the pipes on the fixture. You dropped the fixture on and you had 2 or 3 clamps to take off, raise the fixture, and the pipes you'd nail down with about 5 screws. And that was all done because there was a lot of people working on it, knowing the problems you could have. But that was 1958, and that was the year we had all the moldings on the car.
Right, it was a beautiful car.
Yeah. And I can't remember. We had a year. Well, this was back when I was in repair. We built. What the heck was that car? They were all convertibles, and they were really they had a lot of the basic car, but they were just a great big long convertible flashy car. We only built 900 of them. Wasn't Starfire?
Oh yeah, that was the early.
And it had that white molding.
Yeah. That was was that called a Fiesta or
Fiesta?
Yeah.
That's it. Okay. The Fiesta, and I'm way out of line time-wise
right.
now because that happened when I was still in repair.
That would have been 53, I think, when they were just coming out with the wraparound windshield.
Yeah, that was the first wraparound windshield. Yeah. And okay, that was in 53. I was still in repair in 53, so I obviously went to the front end assembly at maybe about 55 or something. But that was that car was. I don't remember how many we made, but it was like.
It wasn't very many. It was less than 1,000 or something
less
like
than
that.
Like 800 or something. Yeah. But that all came down. Our repair, we had all our repair were pretty well cleaned up, so we were doing a beautiful job on that, getting caught up. But then we had to rebuild those cars practically every. It wasn't not only that they had specific parts, but an awful lot of parts didn't fit. And we had to file and jury rig everything, that was. But they were a beautiful car, and the white molding that went along the side of it. Every time a door next to it opened up, it put a ding in it. We were changing those by the gross until we put one molding down the middle of it. But getting back to
were those kinds of things, Jack, like that car? Was that just a big surprise? It just arrived, sort of, in those days, or did you know it was coming?
It was. You were now. See, there was process people. Now,
okay, so you were.
So we did know about it ahead of time.
Get some of that info.
But But product didn't put I don't think they built the car up like you might have done. So I think there was something lost, and it was lost in the parts going together. We had a terrible time making it fit, and it was pretty near custom fit here, elongating holes and. Part of that was, I think, the suppliers, when you're building 800 of them, I don't know, a lot of them might even been made in some shops that weren't that credible. They said they could do it, alley shops, and they said they could do it, but they couldn't make that bid. But so we did that up on the second floor of 75. We had a place up there, and we reworked all those up. We got it out of the repair system. We're not going to screw up our flow. We finally got that going. Right? But then we go back to 58. Through those years, there wasn't a lot happened. Of course, Minnow retired. That's something that I should remember. Mike Minnow retired. I'm trying to remember what year it was. Well, when I was in the transmission group in 75, before the rest of, and before 60, or what is it, 49, before we moved over there, and after I moved over there, it was when I was in repair. I had the engine dress-up line also with my repair operation. And Bill Slatka was the methods guy. He came over and was worked with me in in that he had that area there, and he had body hardware line, and he had had maybe half the plan as far as methods is concerned. And so we got to know each other quite well, and I gained a lot of respect for Bill because he had a lot of respect for get people in the plant to do things.
Sure.
And he was encouraging. He kept wanting me to go into methods. He kept saying, "Why? Go up there where you can do some good." He kept saying, but Bill was he's rolled up his sleeves and got in and did a lot of things well. And he I remember he did have his biggest downfall was the automatic frame loader. He inherited. He said that from someone, and the frames were automatically loaded onto the two hangers that carried it on the monorail, and we lost hours and hours, and there's a lot of blood and sweat went over it before we finally got rid of that thing. That was again when I was in repair. That had to be in the 50s when early 50s when Bill came in.
Okay. He was
about the 53 or 54.
Okay, that's when
So Minnow must have. Bill was in there in 50, and Bill was superintendent in 58. So he must have come in there a year or so, a couple of years ahead of that. So it must have been about 56.
All right.
I would guess that Minnow left and Bill came. And of course, Bill brought a brand new thinking to the assembly plant. Mike had not had the background up in the plant. He was the old bull of the woods type of manager, and we never lost that. I was talking about everybody contributes something, and we never lost the pace that Minnow put us on the pace down there that we never forgot. We felt the importance of meat production every day and hurrying and doing things in the fastest manner that we could and still build quality. Bill brought in a lot of the, he demanded more out of product engineering. He demanded the product people come over and spend times in our pits. And we, many times I can remember going over to a meeting of John Bell's where we were hammering on the table telling us our electrical connectors won't connect and we should have fail-safe type of thing. So we were really starting with Bill there to put the pressure on product to get some interface with manufacturing that they would respect, because somebody coming out of the assembly plant over there didn't carry the same weight when they went back to product and said we got a problem if a guy. So they did create the George Drake kind of activity, which that operation was really an outstanding asset to us during the early phases when Bill was there. They had engineers that had certain types of the parts of the thing, and they could go over and help us in any kind of a correction that product could help us with. And then they were involved in the future year, and they say, well, next year this is going this way, and they would ask us. So product got good feedback on the new model coming this way. But so we were really making good strides. We were the plant was running well at 58, 59. 60 in 1960. In 1960, we decided they're going to build an intricate body and frame F-85. Is that 60?
Came out in 61, right?
60,
so
right.
60,
61. So this body was used by Buick, Pontiac, and Oldsmobile, or at least three of the car lines. And all the development work and buildup was done in Flint, and Chevrolet. They had some kind of a training center in Chevrolet, and that's where. So we were aware that we were going to build it, and Ken Ricks was general foreman in the area, and I was general foreman, and we both spent a lot of time in Flint looking at that car and trying to get ready for it. Well, about in late 60, we were there was no assistant superintendent in either plant. There was no assistant superintendent at Oldsmobile.
That
It
wasn't
was
a position,
Bill-
it didn't exist.
Didn't exist. Ken Ricks did operate as some kind of Bill broke Ken loose sometime prior to 60, a year or two, and had him as an extra general foreman, called him a general foreman at large, that
All
used
right.
to help do a lot of things that an assistant superintendent would do, settle disputes between general foreman and do some policy implementation and so forth. But in 1960, that's when it was announced that Ken was made assistant superintendent of the F-85, and I was made assistant superintendent of the regular car plant.
Okay.
Uh,
You're still working one shift now, or?
Let's see, I think, yeah, we're still working one shift.
All right.
So that was one of the considerations, was this new shift. We were now going to build that car in the old 16. We're going back where we just came out of.
Right.
And and that was going to be additional volume. And of course, if that volume hit that gate, the paint shop and so forth, it would maybe overstress the system. So it was decided that F-85 shift would start at the second shift. They started out on the
Different.
afternoon shift.
All right.
And so we did all our learning of that in Flint, and of course Ken then spent his time on that, and I spent my time on the other one. They introduced that, and it ran for what, 2 years?
3 years.
3 years. And it varied in line speed. I think they got all the way up to 45 or at one time.
Okay.
In a line speed, they had designed it for 20, but I think we hit 40 a couple times with that thing. But I can't think of a lot of significant things that happened during those years. It seemed like it was kind of the good years. We had a lot of backing from Bill as far as people were very sensitive. We gained an importance to everyone, even in processing, that you better do it right or you'll pay the consequences on the end. Or not only that, but you better do it right because of the significant contribution towards the end result that everyone has, and how important all that early. So we did our stature as far as being recognized as so our stature gained a lot, and we felt good about that. We were invited to a lot of the planning meetings that anyone planned, whether it was a material processing, material handling thing, product thing, and we had board planning meetings. So it was a good time, and repair was kept down to the minimum. Our employment was good because there wasn't a lot of jobs available. The job seemed to be more important at that time. In 1953, we did have a major layoff. That's one of the layoffs I'm talking about. Yeah. And that was the first time that we hired new women. That was, okay. We couldn't get, actually they were having a heck of a time getting employees to fill our jobs. In fact, employment was going up in the Upper Peninsula and going down in Tennessee. Wow. We had a couple employment people that went up the Upper Peninsula and spent weeks trying to get names of people coming down, and they went down south. We also and we hired a lot of women at that time. So that from that point on, women was hired at about the same rate they were available in the workforce. Okay. And they started fitting in and all.
That would have been in the middle 50s.
It was 53. 53. And let's see, where were we?
We're up in the middle of like 63.
We're up in we're up to the,
F-85
yeah, we got through the F-85. That really went well. And now we're up to, we're up to about 1963 to 64, 64.
Yeah, someplace F-85 went away as we knew it and changed.
Well, that's 64. 64 will be a year that anyone in car assembly will never forget. That will never be forgotten. There's more Purple Hearts there than ever before.
I take it that was a problem.
That was a major, major thing that no one has ever attempted to digest. In 1964, let's see, about in March or about in February or someplace early that year, Arnold Hansen, who was our general superintendent, died. And shortly after that, Bill Slack took his job, which created an opening in the car assembly plant. And so along about, I think May or June, he made me superintendent of the car assembly plant. And Ken Ricks and Doug Tracy, Doug Tracy became the other assistant superintendent. And Mike Spitzley, I think, went on as general foreman and so forth, and on all the way on down. I had been in on not a lot of it was long about that time that Ed Cole was president of the corporation, and he had the belief, which was a right belief, that there should be no repair, and he wanted the repair systems taken out of all General Motors plants, and so we had 2 lines, repair lines. So the decision was made to take 1 line out and fill it with concrete. And I found that out after I was made superintendent, so I didn't let him fill it with concrete. I covered it with, yeah. Well, his Goldberg, we're going to completely put them out, but we sort of got an okay to put sheet metal over it and keep the system intact. But it was just an open aisle. But it would be prime to knowing we had this new model, we were making major changes coming up, and not have to throw that system away when we could have used it. So the new model, as we approached what we were doing, we were introducing a brand new model. The F-85 was going to a frame. And it was completely new sheet metal. It was completely, there wasn't one bolt, nut, or piece on that car that fitted in the previous car. Every part was new. And you now had a major instrument panel that's built up off the line. It was built more like the big car. We were already building the 98, the 88, in that car. We had the station wagon in there also, and the station wagon had leaf springs, and I remember in the other cars had coil springs. So there's a lot of things that didn't fit, and now we're taking a car that was the equivalent of, well, than the N car, the Calais they just introduced, and without a lot of without the recognition of that, what that would do to that system. And it wasn't only, we now had a 98 that had a major size change. We had an 88 that had a major size change, and we had a new F-85 that was completely changed completely. We had terrible quality problems with things fitting. And we had to take, and we were on 1 shift, so we had to take the group of people that were building F-85s in 16 and the people that were building B's and C cars in 75 and combine them and divide them into 2 shifts, which meant you had to have many more supervisors, you had to have many more relief men, you had to have duplicate everything. And that really turned out to be a bigger problem than, it really wasn't a bigger problem. If you sit down and analyze it, it was impossible to do in the first place. With the, we had no pilots cars here in Lansing of the A job. They were all built in Flint. So, and then there was a lot of major problems with parts, fenders. We just had terrible problems making a sheet metal fit on that new car. We come up with a new thing called snowplow. The fenders were out at then. It was constantly reworked on every part of that car. Fisher Body had a major problem. Their pilot holes were all over. So, and we had so many new supervisors, we had to put on about 7 or 8 new supervisors. But that was 100, and so we're building, see our overall, it was an overall increase of production. When you went 60 an hour, we were now building 2,000 cars a day, whereas before we were building 100 an hour for 8 hours. We built 890 cars, plus we're building about another 160 on that. We built about 1,000 cars. All of a sudden, we're going to 2,000 cars with a brand new model, with all models. It damn near killed all of us. I tell you, we shipped around the clock. We had I had foreman keel over on me. There was so much in, and we really didn't have the backup or the help that anything like, you had later on, like in the end job, my God. So that was a major, and just trying to get through it. But the thing that was amazing to us was we had lots of problems, and we finally got over them. We even had a product engineering was doing repair on cars. We were taking cars over to product and put them on. And but when we got on top of it, then anyone that went through that model change had a lot of stamina. We got through that, and the GMAD plants, Leeds was trying to build this car, and they hadn't shipped a car, and we shipped thousands of cars,
and they were only making.
They were making the one. They were making the F85 in the 3 models,
right? And
they had shipped one car, and they had oh my God, they had like 8,000 cars in repair. And Bob Rollis says, well, God, he says, Wolfram wants us to take flat cars, put them on there and bring them back here and do repair. Well, we were just done out. And so oh, no way, we're going to kill these people. There's no way after all the efforts we've done that we should do that. If you want to take some of my people and send them down there. I'll dig out some people, even repairmen, tell us what they want. But they didn't, they were determined they were going to ship back here. But anyhow, it ended out, we sent people down there, and in fact, Huey Stanley went down as one of the supervisors, and I sent other supervisors down to help get it. And we were by far the worst plant in the corporation, and we had gone from 1 shift to 2. This is the first time we'd ever been on 2 shifts. We had never been on 2 shifts since way back when I started in 46. When we moved into new plant, we went on 1 shift in 49, and we'd been on 1 shift 49 right up till that time. So we had a reason, and the other thing which we couldn't understand is, as it went on, our quality was better than it had been at some other years. So there was some good things and came out of it as far as comparing with other divisions in the corporation. But anyhow, we leads finally got on track, and we went on, and that's the first time that we ever shipped 2,000 cars in a day.
Yeah.
And in fact, there's no assembly plant in the world that shipped 2,000 cars a day. Built 2,000 cars and shipped them in a day. So we'd established sort of a first. Let's see. After that, it was long back. Back when I was assistant superintendent is when we, in trying to improve quality, and you were constantly doing things along that line. We introduced the Bright system as trying to remember, I can't remember the year, but we formalized that. In fact,
that little brochure you
that
had,
little brochure I gave you,
gave.
we made the brochures,
Okay.
and we realized that worked well in the departments that I had been in. So I got a guy, Duncan McGinn, and we developed a written program for that, and so we gave it a name and called it Pride for Personal Responsibility and Defect Elimination. And and it was a double shift thing, and it really was. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, that had to be back in the mid-50s when I was made assistant superintendent, I think.
Okay.
Or no, that was in the 60, I was assistant superintendent.
All right, we got her.
There. Now that's when it was formalized.
All right.
And however, we used it. A lot of the corporate people came. Anytime we had a president of the corporation or the chairman or anybody came in, we'd give a little pitch on this Pride program. And they always, they'd go out and watch it work. They'd see a person identify something, and they sent an awful lot of people in here to observe it and try to get it going in their plan. But it was very difficult in their plan because the union was such a gradual thing that we did in our plan. The union, local union, and we worked with them, and they accepted it. If a person did, it was a matter of employment, really. It was sabotage. If a person knew they let something go and they didn't identify it, it was subject to corrective action, whatever you could do, all the way from explaining to the person to try to make sure he didn't do it again to, if he did it 20 times, he'd out the door. And and at the end of each department, we had a catalog or a recording to show anything the repairman might find that wasn't written up, which would be very little, but if they did, then that was recorded, and you'd go back to try to find out what it was. So there was a checking system on it.
Okay.
But and that carried on with us all the time up to till we retired. In when we went to this 2-shift thing, I realized I wanted to have more input into the forward planning myself rather than just process people. They did a good job, but I wanted to have a manufacturing guy in this in my own area, in a place where we could fool around and with new processes and so I developed this place down under the Building 19. We called it the Assembly Research Lab. Became very famous.
Sure, good name.
And we gave it a highfalutin name, and we put Big Hangsman in there. And this was where that was a resource for any supervisor that if he saw something coming up or he was having a problem, Vic not only worked on trying to develop a process that would work for our ongoing, but on the new model, this is where you'd bring people down and they'd put the car together 8 or 10 times until they were sure they could do it perfectly. And And the George Drake Group, the type of product representative there, and the process guy out of Building 40, that was just an accepted area where all that came together, and we put a classroom in there, and that became our in-house forward planning area.
And you ran that all year round?
And ran it all year round. The guy that ran it all year, we ran it all year round in January. Usually he, most of the processes and things were developed. So in January, he worked 3 days a week on cost improvement. So he had cost improvement. We also had a fellow work out of there as far as an audit on our price system. What he would do would go into an area, unbeknown to anyone, and he would look at cars and find if anything was missed as far as being written up or not repaired. And so he worked for Ansman, and he audited our system, and that would be presented every week, and he would show where any system was.
Prior to that, people had audited.
No one audited it. The only audit you had was if you got a repair something down on the repair line, they found on the repair line, you would go back and find out whether it had been written up.
Yeah.
We started with crayons, and the crayon got to be a problem to get off the thing. So we got with the crayon company and told them we wanted a water soluble crayon, and they developed one strictly for us. It was the first water soluble crayon that they had, so that no matter where you put the crayon, when it went through the washer at the end of the line, it washed off. Along about that time, Tom Tompkins came in. Don Darton was away. We missed the. We haven't got to the tornado at all.
No, the tornado, 66.
66, yeah, 60. That was 64, 65.
Calendar year, I guess.
Yeah, 65 was just the year we went on and did our job. Then the tornado was announced, and that was an exciting thing because they were doing all the building of the development, or the engineering thing was going to, the first ones we wanted to build a second one. They built one in engineering, but we decided we were going to put a spot and build all of them over in our, and we'd have people in there. So Ken Ricks was made assistant superintendent of that, and he was the head of he handled all the prototype and pilot and all the way up to putting that in progress. And we had a great program. In fact, the first car, we had car number 1, we had a month and a half to build. And the second car, we had a month to build. The third car, we had lots of time, and we got into it early on, and our acceleration rate was determined by us. And by the time you got up to 6 cars, you were still taking a day to build them, or a day and a half to build one car.
And were you building these online or off in the home?
No, we were building, well, the first like 14 or 15 or maybe 20 were built in a pilot area off the line.
Pilot area.
And we didn't have any line.
They were putting
they put the line in. They didn't have any line to put in. So Larry Kerr was the methods guy on it. Larry did a great job. That it was, we carried it was our first, we built the chassis up on that knife conveyor, and of course the engine, the body was built up on a carrier, and it's the system you're using now down there. The body is buried on a carrier, and it was kept on the carrier until it would come down and got overhead the engine. The engine was hoisted up into that and locked in with 3 bolts, isolation bolts at the bottom. And then the body came down, and then the body eventually came down and set on the chassis. And that turned out to be a great car. They just really never had any problem. The only problem we had, the body was built in Cleveland at
Euclid.
Euclid.
That was the place.
Euclid
Yeah.
in Cleveland, and they shipped them in here. And we had a meeting with Euclid. I'll never forget. And a guy by the name of Hopkins was the plant manager, and his boss came in with him, and we sat around about the planning, and we were talking about how they would fit into the end of the line as far as their responsibility, as far as the body's concerned. And this fellow says, "Well, we're not going to send any repair up there." And he says, "There'll be no repair, absolutely no repair." So, and he says, "Well, there, Hopkins." Hopkins is a plant manager.
Yeah, right.
And Hopkins says, "Well, maybe we don't have a crib up there." He says, "There'll be no repair, will there, Hopkins? We aren't going to put anything up there." And Hopkins says, "No." So, after we started the car, Tornado up, we just had all kinds of problems as far as Fisher's concerned. And they finally sent a couple people up, and then we hired a couple of people, and a couple from Lansing came over. And we put actually a Lansing Fisher body supervisor came over and handled the Fisher body end of it. But that ran till the year we have the picture of the end, and I'm not sure when that is, but that was a great car line. All the people went over there, had a lot of pride. They were selected. We did a lot of job of selecting them out of the other plant. It's the first time we decided that we weren't going to put relief men in there, because as slow as you're going with, say, 2 minutes worth of work to do on a car, there's so much work to do. A relief man would be like building half the car. He wouldn't be an expert at it, and he would forget some of the things he did. So because of the work content, we decided we'd shut down for relief, and we said we wanted to do that. The management went along with it. And we did shut down for relief, which was the first part in the corporation that did that, and they're all doing it now.
How fast did that line go?
I'm trying to remember. I had a
24 an hour.
It got there. It got up darn near. I think it got up to 28, 29. At darn near. I know at one time we were going to put a second shift on, and we were going to go trying to get to 30 on both shifts. That was the pipe dream they had after about the first month of introduction. we never got the second shift on. We were all set to go up to and then it stabilized at I think we got up at about 28 something. I don't think we got over 30, although we could have. But that was a good instance of the people had a day. They had a day shift. All the other plant was switching shifts, so they were motivated to stay there. It's the only place in the assembly plant you could work straight days. The supervisors, that was a motivation for them too, and then the line speed was slow. You didn't have relief men, which always does cause a problem. We always felt relief, especially if you haven't got the most experienced relief man, does cause problems. So that was a good operation all the way up till it ended. Buick and Cadillac put in the same type of front wheel drive, their Eldorado and Riviera, and they just never even come close to cost wise or to compete with us. And it was partially because of Rich did a great job, and all the people, they had a good esprit de corps and so forth. Of course, that was the motivation. The other plant, we were shifting shifts every so often. And
that was a normal occurrence. Jack swinging shifts.
We never swung. That was the other variable that was introduced when I became superintendent. We not only introduced a new car, we changed the other two models. We put a second shift on for the first time, and we were swinging shifts. Hourly eventually stayed on the second shift, And so you had all your young bucks, your wild young new hires, all new hires went on nights, and the opposite was on days. So it, the supervisors decided they wanted to swing. They wanted to swing every so often.
Okay.
Which, when you look at it, you might say, well, that's not good, but it really was good because it gave you two supervisors in each area, and we combined different traits. Sometimes a good organizer with a heck of a good mechanic, and a lot of places it eliminated all 78s, job speed ups jobs because you'd have a guy on nights or on days that could do the job super good, and the guy on nights couldn't do it quite so well, and this guy was above average operator.
Yeah.
But then when you switch the supervisors, uh, it really washed out 80% of our problems between shifts.
So that was more of an asset than a problem.
It turned out to be an asset. Another thing, the supervisors on nights never would get to go to product engineering. The superintendent would never see them.
Yeah.
You had some real sharp guys on nights that would like to show off in front of the superintendent or assistant. They could never go to safety store. So there was the people in the plant, the salary people in the plant really wanted to do that. And if it would have been a detriment to the operation, we wouldn't have done it. But as we found out, it proved much more beneficial. You had the brains of two people in the area, and if one guy did, and keeping the jobs balanced between that kept them. So if you had one guy off, the job was exactly the same on days, nights. If you put a new guy on nights, you forgot he had an extra job. We kept it was the need to do that was good, and then but it did introduce a new complaint about problems you had on the day shift or the night shift. It was the other shift that caused the problem. So we had to get rid of that. We did. Let's see. Where are we? We're up
See, we're up at 66. We're gone into that. Now you're still superintendent.
Oh yeah, superintendent. Then okay. Well then.
That changed somewhere along.
Yeah. Well, 69. I went up there in 69. So Arnold Hansel, who was general superintendent, died suddenly at home from a heart attack, and shortly after that, Bill was given that job, and I was made superintendent.
Yeah, you were superintendent.
Wait a minute, I was made general superintendent.
Oh, you were general superintendent when that happened.
No, I was when Arnold died, I was superintendent.
Okay.
And it was in 1969. I went up there.
Right.
And Bill went up and wait a minute. Bill went up there, and I was made superintendent. You're going to have a hell of a time starting this. That was in 64. I already said this.
Yeah, you went through that.
I went through, so you can erase I'll erase this last 5 minutes. Now we're trying to get, now in 1969, Bill decided to go overseas. He was offered a job in England, and so he took that job, and it was shortly after that I was given the job of general superintendent.
Okay. Then who took over as the superintendent?
And Ken Ricks took over as superintendent, and then.
This is a recording of G.J. Jack McGinn of 4661 Danbury in Okemos, Michigan, or 3809 Fishing Trail in Sarasota, Florida. This recording was made at the Oldsmobile History Center in Lansing by Jim Walkinshaw on October 20th, 1989. This is tape number 3 of 3 tapes. Now, there were
Well, we're up to
assistant
there.
superintendent
All right, we got
that you had.
Ken Ricks replaced me, and then there was 4 assistant superintendents. There was 2 on each shift. One had the downstairs and one had the upstairs.
Okay.
And there was Mike Kachuk, Jerry Bowman, Mike Spitzley, and Doug Tracy.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the 4.
All right. Now, you left the car assembly.
I left and went up at that point, and I was also at that point in charge of the engine plant.
Oh.
So I went to the engine plant. Doug Tracy. Well, Doug had just gone down there actually. Doug Tracy had just prior to my being made general superintendent, Doug Tracy had been transferred to the engine plant as superintendent when Harold Otten retired.
Oh, okay. All right.
So I had Doug Tracy, Frank Seltzer, who had paint.
All right.
And Ken Ricks, who had the car assembly plant.
Okay.
And so the engine plant was a brand new place for me, and the engine plant was at a time when they couldn't make enough engines, and they had the 3 rough. There was 338, 22, and 28.
The block line
were the block lines, and they could nowhere near keep up with the amount of engines we wanted to build on the assembly line. So those block lines run 7 days a week, around the clock, over holidays. They never stop.
Oh my goodness.
And even then, we had to forecast how many engines we made, because actually for every engine we made, we could make a car, and we needed to make the cars. So there was tremendous pressure on the block lines, but whatever your bottleneck operation was, you weren't going to go any faster than the maximum capacity you could get out of that. So, and the engine assembly line, we were going about 225 to 240 an hour. They had, but the block line, we went 40 hours a week, and the block lines went the full week around the clock to try to get enough blocks to do that. I'm trying to think of anything significant.
That must have been about the time we got into the Chevrolet engine problem.
Well, the Chevrolet engine, that came, that was why the Chevrolet engine came in.
That, wasn't it?
We had the need of extra engines, and we could not build anymore. Yeah. So whatever we couldn't build, and whatever sales could sell, that shortfall was taken up with the Chevy 350, which turned out to be a controversial move.
Yeah.
I can't, trying to think of some significant things. There's not, they started to look at new material for the blocks, because, especially the manifolds, because they had to get weight out of engines. And so there was 2 things that happened a couple of years later, and that was they were coming out with this new manifold, which was like an egg crate. And your machining had to be so much more accurate than, because you go right through the shell of
very thin,
and very, very thin. And we introduced that, and at the same time, we started to think about diesels, and we set up a diesel line. In fact, they were this. I can't relate just exactly year-wise with it, but that
would have been 77 or 8, maybe, in there somewhere. When did you retire?
I didn't retire until 83.
Okay.
So the main problem with the engine plant from the time that I went down there in '69. Well, it wasn't bad in '69. It wasn't until about 70 or 71, '69, when Doug was in there. They were working 40 hours a week, going home.
Mhm.
There was no problem. The availability of engines was no problem. Must have been our demand was down, or we had access to other engines.
Yeah.
But in about 71, the 350, the 455, they threw that was eliminated, and the production. I'm not sure what year that was eliminated, but it was gone at that.
Yeah.
And our demand for 350s was
That's when we
more
went
than
through the oil crunch, wasn't it? They got rid of the big engine there.
big engine about that time.
Disappeared. That was 74 maybe when the oil crunch
Yeah,
started. So
right
somewhere
in there.
right in there.
And then right after that was when they went all out again. They wanted all the engines.
Yeah.
So that was the significant thing that you were constantly doing was trying to get enough blocks to get every block you could out of the system. Then of course the diesel was designed. Boy, and I can't remember the year that came out.
I'm sure that's 77 for
77.
Yeah, I'm
the
sure
first
77. Yeah.
Well, anyhow, we set up a diesel assembly line paralleling right alongside the other assembly line, and
And you were general
I was just
superintendent
a
at that
general
time.
superintendent at that
Okay.
time. That was 77, huh?
Yeah.
All right. Along about that time, they decided to build a new car assembly plant in the assembly area using the storage building we had across the street and adding on to it and building a new cutlass plant, which
Okay.
I think that started.
76. That was 76.
All right, well in '76,
Yeah.
I just barely got into the diesel engine.
All
I
right.
think
So that
it was
must
Judd
have-
Cordes when I left
Yeah.
there.
All that pre-planning that was
Yeah,
done.
all the pre-planning.
Uh-huh.
In fact,
All right.
I remember, I think we built 5 engines off there where we maybe didn't build any engines off there. And Doug Tracy left and went, did he go to plant 2
Yeah.
as manager? And Mike Spitzley came in there early on there. And when I left, Mike was in charge of that, and Judd Cordes took my place because they were going to build a new car assembly plant, and they wanted me to handle practically all the planning.
Okay.
So after, I think we opened the new Cutlass Assembly Center in '79.
Was it 79? I remember.
Last '78 or '79.
Okay, could be.
70 in that area.
Yeah.
You got a movie on that, didn't you?
Hell yeah. Plus, I've got some pictures I can find in the file. Like it's a Cutlass dedication,
Yeah,
such and such
yeah.
a date. So
Yeah.
we can spot that one.
Yeah, so previous to that, during that following year, we did a lot. We got a group of people representing every department that would be in that new plant. We had reliability, material handling. They all formed a group, an operating group to plan for that plant. And there was process people and methods people in there too. And so there was really a thorough effort to involve people and try to design in that plant everything we could to help the person that would eventually put the car together, and especially take their input. That was the year I remember we always would give the employee heck for having his lunch bucket under his hopper. That used to be something. Get that lunch bucket and his coat out of there. And there was some centralized locker way down that he'd have to put it in. So that was the first thing we did. We took the old front end assembly area and got some people out of that area and asked them to to help design with Frank Fowler and the best workplace layout they could have. And that's one thing they wanted, a place to put their dinner bucket and hang their clothes. And then the accessibility to everything. And there was a lot of work done on that. And today those things are in most all plants.
Was this the first time, Jack, that we'd done
It's the first
concerted
time.
effort to get the hourly guys involved in all of that?
Well, to some extent, you know, a good supervisor always did that. You go back, even back when that was a significant difference between your good and bad supervisors, was how much input I think you got from the people and how much they try to help them, because you couldn't dictatorial run any department. But it was the first time. No, there was a time. It started about that time. One of the things that I did one time when before I left down there, and I did it with myself many times, as I have what you call a certification program. So I guess I was general superintendent when we decided that I wanted to do that with everybody, and we'd have what we call a certification program. We always trying to come up with some gimmick there. And the certification program was nothing more than an employee and a supervisor sitting down together, and there was an outline of things that they would check they discussed, and the employee signed the thing, and it was a lot like asked him all about his job and what he would do to change it, and could he do every job every time without ever missing a job, and what would it take to make sure you could do everything perfect. And on the bottom of that, we had a lot of things written. I know I took all the ones with the writing on them and gave them to Frank Fowler, and the following year we changed them over. There was a lot of simple things that came up that we didn't realize. One was just the way the monorail ran, or come down and back, and if it could have just had a bigger bulge in it there, it just made a tremendous amount of difference. And I mean, the cost was insignificant. Yeah. And we also did I put Vic Angsman in there to take care of the product end of the business, and along about not too far after that, we were getting deeply involved in QWL, and we involved Dutch Landon's group out of Detroit. He came in and did a survey on absenteeism, and there was an extensive survey, which maybe it's around someplace. And in doing that, we tried to find out where we're trying to improve absenteeism. In doing that, we became associated with several of his people that were knowledgeable of the process of group dynamics, where you get a group in a room and make them solve their own problem, and then they figures a better result and so forth if they did it. And so I became quite enticed me on many of the things they did, and so I thought, well, now there's another place I could put a guy. So Duncan McLean was working for me, and he had been a teacher, and he's quite good verbally and written good, and had been in many different areas. So I talked to him about the job, that kind of a job, so we dealt him in on some of this development work and with the people in Detroit. And later on, I said, well, would you like to do that full time? I said, as many people we got, we could use a guy like you to just help the employees and have a training program, so forth, and for the QWL aspect of it. So he said yes, so I put him on. But both Vic Angsman were not titled what they were. They were just hidden people. They were extra foremen I had. Yeah. But I gave him a different name on my old chart. But we did a lot of things with him. He made film for all our drivers on how to drive, and one of the things everybody felt, all these human behavior scientists felt if you rotated jobs, this would help the attitude towards doing the job. So we did a lot of research on that. We tried to make it mandatory. Everybody try 2 or 3 jobs. We did it in small areas, and some people liked to do it, and some people didn't want to do it at all, or were mad about it. So we finally realized we've got to be selective and only do it where the people really enjoy doing that. So, but it's just like a lot of new fads. They say make everybody rotate. Well, that was my idea. That's what I thought would be the answer, but it was soon. But when we saw it couldn't be handled that way. We did it where we did. We could do it. So he went on throughout the plan, asking people about if they'd like to, and then we would have an extra hourly person try to work it out. The other thing we did, everyone knows the 5 worst jobs in the plant. I mean, you know what they are. They're either the heaviest. Every superintendent knows what's his worst job, his worst 5 jobs. So I asked all the foremen, all the superintendents. Well, I asked Ken to get everybody to come up with the 5 or the 10 worst jobs, and so we took 5 of those jobs, and we got. I remember Frank Fowler and Don Gallen and a guy from product. They met over in the conference rooms, and the relief men from both shifts, the committee men from both shifts. You're asking if people participated. That's one of the first ones to come up with anything they wanted to make that job easier to do on the employee and make it more defect free. So and so we came up with the 5 jobs, and they did a lot of work on them. And Duncan McLean was his assignment to work this out, and that was kind of about the first. That was really the first time that the hourly people ever sat down with the product engineer, with the guy that made the thing, and here's the guy that buys the tools, and this is the guy that does this and sets the standard, and so forth.
As a little team, sort of.
And as a team, and if he said something that he wanted, he was talking right to the person that could change. So we implemented all the things. One of the jobs was throwing the A-frame on the front of the chassis, that bone crusher there. And people always complained about that job, and so we told them we taught anything's fair game. Come up with conveyor, anything you want. And they did a lot of rearranging. They did rearrange the conveyor a little bit, did a lot of this, but they bought some equipment that brought the thing right out over the line. Well, they ended up manhandling them.
Going back.
Well, they gained a lot, but then the end up was they manhandled them, and the guy that was on the job, he was proud of the fact he could do it, but you never heard another complaint out of those people ever, because they designed it.
Part of it.
They did the thing, and they found out they went back close to where they were in the first place. But I know air conditioning bench job was one of them, and they made 2 or 3 changes in the product that could be changed. It really helped them without. So between this job certification program, where we had the supervisor and one person sit down and analyze this job, and then we took anything from that and did it and then this job here, which was a group of jobs, was kind of the first thing, and Duncan McLean was, of course, sort of the nucleus behind that. So after that happened, we had a major conveyor change in Building 16. All our people went over to the layout board. It got so after that, any change at all, everybody went over to the layout board. Everybody. They went to both shifts. They'd have somebody come in at night, and so they started to become involved in things that later on they could complain that they never knew it, or why did you make this way? Because I'd like it that way. Which, and a lot of good input came out of it, because they're intimately concerned with their own job. But as Duncan went on, and we went on, and we went into the, remember we put a television thing in each, forget what we call that. We always thought that we're paying the people for relief, and they're sitting there. Maybe we can come up with something they can look at that would be worthwhile. So we come up with, got to get, remember.
They had these little relief areas with that.
Yeah, video, they were all over. They had them, and Vic Ainsman kept that up. They kept putting different things on that, but it was a communication device. We also had a rocket set up in all the areas, which at one time we had all departments with a goal to get. And we had, I had a tech student that spent his fifth year, and I had him break it down so that every group had a line across there that they set, and then they'd see how they, because feedback really motivates people. If they know what you want, and if they know, if they get it, you will recognize them a little bit, not a lot. You don't have to do a lot. Just say, well, you made it. So we started doing a lot of that with Duncan. Now, then when we went into this new assembly plan, this whole Duncan and this whole thing kind of fit in with this new group. Into a lot, they met down that research lab. A lot of the time they met up building 40 a lot of times. And each one worked with his own superintendent and general superintendent, but they all came under my guidance, and I met with them weekly, and then we would have a report. We would report back to the superintendents, or to the superintendents, general superintendents, and whoever staff every 4 weeks. And I think I'm sure you were involved in some of those. And but everything was fair game in that plant, because we were starting from the name of the movie that is in the libraries from the ground up, and so it was easy to change then, and you could never change it after. So I spent all of 77 after I left down the engine plant, 78, 79, getting that plant going, and we turned the plant on in 78, late 78 or 79. We set up and ran as soon as we got the plant running. Before we had to run, we had Fisher Body build 100 extra cars a day, and we started running through this plant at 15 or 20 an hour to test out the system. So we got that online. There was a big citywide open house for that, and we met our objectives. We didn't meet our budget that first year, but we met all our we were close to it. We were a lot closer than they were the first one on the engine. But we met our schedule. We didn't, that was one of the concerns with Fisher Body and the corporation. By putting this plan in, we'd hold up Fisher and not meet our schedule. But we met our schedule every month. And
what precipitated the plan in the first place? Do you remember? What made the need for it happen?
Well, that's, see, we were going, well, it'll give you more, if you wanted more production, we were at our limit as far as, and the part of the thing is, they split the paint plant in two. There was some paint processes that were coming up that was going to restrict, they were going to have to duplicate the paint plant. And so they had an A-body paint plant and a B-body paint plant with these new water-soluble dispersion types of paint, which were the damnedest thing that we ever had. Get the humidity up someday and the paint would start falling off the fenders. Those were tough years, because the paint was not it wasn't formalized from base up.
Yeah.
This new paint they got is just tremendous,
Yeah.
but they kept doing something with the paint each year to make the stack requirements right, and the paint going on the fenders was one of the last considerations. Or it was not the last, but it was hurt by the fact you had to meet an emission standard.
Yeah.
You wouldn't build at all.
Yeah.
But you could get more cars if you wanted to. If you wanted to go above 60 an hour, you could do it. And then we felt they put some value on taking one model out of having two models in one plant, one model in the other. We felt there was a quality improvement. I think the quality improvement, the potential capacity, and part of the plant was already there in that warehouse that we built that you knew they were going to take use sometime down the line anyhow. But as that went on, she's 80, we're up now 80, and 81 was probably the first years that were good years where all the bugs were washed out of the thing. And so we had some good years, 80 and 81. I'm trying to remember some. We had Basinski in there as assistant superintendent. I remember Roger came over as assistant superintendent from product, and that plant. Kelly was on one shift. I used Larry Abbott a lot as far as all during the development of the new plant. Larry was sort of the coordinator. He was, he did coordinate an awful lot of the activity for me and did a good job. Though now we're at the point where they're looking at what can we're going to have to go down the line. We're going to lose these cars, and the V car, the 98's going out. So we were bidding on other cars, and car lines, I know the first one was a Sierra. They went after that, hot and heavy, and then this N car came out, and that looked like we could get it, so we went after that. And many of the things that we were trying to change, we were trying to change some things during this period of time anyhow, and some of it was changed. One of the things was, and looking at cost too, is our body flow was so big. Right now, the reduction of inventories and just in time was getting looked at, and it was getting looked at serious. Any place you had 10 of something, you ought to go down to 1 of something and have it arrive just before you use it. And it certainly was a gold mine as far as saving money, because even over the engine plant, those blocks, we had them lined up out there for weeks, and we really, in some areas, but one of the things that necessitated the big body flow we had was the fact we had to stay on tape. We had to have enough bodies in our body flow to keep paint on tape, which was way out there from the end of the body hardware line, was like another 150 points beyond the hardware line. So to broadcast, keep the paint on tape, you had to have 150 jobs in there. And then, of course, to mix them right, we tried to mix according so that you wouldn't get 398s in a row. And then you had to have another 50 or 75 so they came in mixed right, so the operator could do his job, to balance it. And we recognized if we could get that scheduling, if Fisher Body could do as GMAD does, if they could keep those cars in sequence, you could sequence them by, or have them come in at the beginning, and they'd flow all the way through. Well, there's two major, or there's one major problem to that, and that was Fisher repair. When they'd go off and repair, they'd all get mixed up. And so we So they were talking about how they could do that. So we said we'll take Fisher Repair over at our place. In fact, the guys in the repair hall wanted to take Fisher Repair over anyhow because they never liked the running back and
Okay.
but we set up and took over Fisher Repair. So all repair would come to Fisher from Fisher Body to us. They should go right through their system to the end of the line,
Straight through.
out to the loading dock, right onto our line, and they would already be scheduled in at Fisher Body. But we didn't have the computer set up right then. But we knew that we had to take that over first, so we took that over, and the let's see, I don't think there was anything else. Paint, we decided also, one of the major things that we decided early on, if we're going to spend money to build a new plant, we are wasting a ton of money painting fenders and hoods in a separate place when they could ride through free on a body and get painted for nothing. So we decided that if we build a new plant, that cost-wise, that washes out the whole paint practically. It was just a tremendous increase. It was horrible the way we were doing it. So that was decided to move over there. Also, during for them to turn their plant around and put all their added lines in, they had to open up some area for the turnaround, and that meant that the cushion rooms had to go out of Fisher Body. So we told them we would take the cushion rooms at Oldsmobile. So in 1980, 1982, at the startup of 1982, we took over the cushion for the BC car and built all cushions in the BC car, which was the harder cushion to build, and we did it at a time when we could accelerate and get whatever advantage we could out of maybe accelerating it rather than starting at full speed. And that was a major learning process because we had two unions and two bargaining units, so we had to offer people a chance to come over. If they didn't want to come over, we had to send people over there to learn the job. Fisher Body on that, for some reason, Fisher Body on that, they had a lot of labor problems on that thing, and every time they settled a labor problem, they gave them a new rate. They'd give the guys 5 cents more an hour or something. They was in that little push room. There was I can't imagine there was 15 or 20 different rates. And so when we talked about it, we said, well, we only have two rates. We have a repair rate, a relief rate, and an assembler rate, and that's the only rates we have over here. So you're going to have to get rid of all those rates. There were a lot of them, 10, 15 cents more an hour.
Oh, really? Oh.
But then we had the right to do it to move them over, and they had the right, and we had the right to run our plant like they had the right to come, but we had the right to pay them as we were paying our other people. Mm-hmm. And of course, they wrote a policy grievance, which really didn't bother us. That could go down, and that is something they had to do to satisfy the people because they thought we were taking something away from them instead of taking something away they should never had. I mean, we showed them our people on our line all over most of the jobs just as harder than pushing room. And we said we aren't going to give you more than what all our people get. It's not fair. So that was part of the decision-making process. Mm-hmm. Some of them, but a lot of them came. But anyhow, that came over at the beginning of the model run. Then in 1982, during the Christmas break, we brought the other car line over. We brought the Cutlass Assembly Center's cushions over.
So we had them all now.
So then we took them all. The first year we digested the first one. Then the second one, we took over and put the system in at Christmas. And, well, that was, we did a lot of maneuvering there. Of course, we had a lot of seats in cars that we had all the way back over there to give us a good start. But we did not lose a car in production during that time. So that's shortly, that was in January 1983, and not too long after that I retired, which was in March. I decided to retire. I didn't really get out there until August.
Mm-hmm. August of 83.
August of 83 is the official retirement date. But I had left. I had time coming and so forth. So I really was finished on May 1st, 1983. So that's.
Jack, what do you think during all that time was maybe the most significant thing that happened?
Oh, the significant thing that happened. The most significant thing happened after I left, when they went to VOC broke up the divisions. That was the most significant thing. Well, I think the back when we had that model startup that nobody knew how to do anything, the realization that the importance of the final operator,
49 thing.
The 49 thing was the significant thing. See, Fred Jantz, we sent him Parker over there. We just harped and harped. I had never seen his department until I just accidentally ran on it that one day, and then he did some three things for me so I could put him on a hopper. I asked him to do it, blow it up. He said he didn't have time, and I told him I'd pay him, charge it to $1,400. So, and then by hanging those first ones up, I took those, used them in many meetings, showing, gee whiz, look at what we could do versus me out there. And then I showed him what I did with a praying, and I mean, it's ridiculous. So, and then there's nothing like thousands of cars in repair to make people motivated to. Sometimes you gotta hit the person between the eyes with a crowbar before they realize. But I don't think I have those general foremen. Then I was worried as hell going into that thing. But half those people thought, well, it'll come out somehow. I got a good mechanic here, and he'll figure out how to do it, and the parts will show up. But they really never had been involved in anything as critical as that. But the evolution of that to the broadcast back to Bud Hoffman having putting on 4 of those things, and then Jim Fuller getting into it, and each year and coming over and we never even got involved in it. They just took and interpreted it for us. But we always, after the startup, we'd always miss something with what, if we did it wrong, you'd do it on every car. So you'd
have a lot of mistakes.
You'd have a lot of mistakes, but boy, once you corrected it, you never had it again. But what I always had tried to have Jim write every type of, maybe take 50 cars and write up, and he wanted to do every type that he had, so we could sort of run a system check.
See if it worked.
But it was tough to run a system check on that. But it was so gratifying then when you got aim manuals and just tools that were needed so badly out there, and then when Bill came in, Bill made a significant change in that, because but each person did something, and like even Bill or any of us think Minnow established the pace that we ran the places, and we didn't tolerate excuses, that kind of thing. A lot of that rubbed off from him, but he had no, I'll never forget when I went from the repair job over to the front end assembly to put on a fender. I, I didn't know, I got there, I think, 3 weeks, 3 days or something before his model turn. And I looked at the prototype or the pilot, and here, to get to the bolt that tightens the fender to the body, you've got to get in under and put a gun way up in, you can't even see it. It's unbelievable. Now, Bill would have no more tolerated that, or I would, nobody would tolerate that anymore. Then, I'm sure Minna went to a meeting and he probably said, hey, that's gonna be a damn, and somebody in product said, God damn it, we design them, you put them together. There's no way we can move that. In fact, it's gonna cost something. And, so that was a perfect example. If I had that operator off, he got sick, I couldn't put the damn car together.
Mhm.
In fact, that was the first thing I did is, I kept a guy, the first night I was there, I kept a guy, till 10 o'clock that night, putting fenders on and off that thing, so I'd have some guy that had some semblance of, but that's the type of
Yeah,
thing that,
yeah.
and you're completely aware of that changeover,
Sure.
but you're not aware of the hopelessness of seeing that line move down the line, thing coming down towards you, and you have to teach these people, and you haven't got the tools to teach. In fact, you don't hardly know yourself what's supposed to be. And that's why I was really obstinate about a pilot, what is it, a pilot area to build all the prototype, or all the pilot cars.
Yeah.
And Pontiac built this great big pilot place where they built all 15 pilots in, and Buick did. And the cook and somebody, Metzel or somebody called me down and said, well, we want one of those. Look at how beautiful it is. And I both, yeah, I said, we're going to put it on the line, and the guy's going to build it on the line with the people that I don't care how we get it on the line, we jury rigged a lot of things to make that body go down the line. But before it went down the line, that foreman was scrambling all over hell, and so was his group leader and his relief men trying to figure out how to build that thing. And then he also had to do all the repair. Once it got to the end of the line, no pilot guy did any repair.
Yeah.
The guy that caused the repair went down and
You screw it up, you fix it.
you screwed up. Well, it's a learning process.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And a lot of times people don't know what they do.
Yeah.
But we never had a pilot, but Pontiac, several times I got told to put a pilot in and build them all, and product engineers were, but boy, when we started up, and we did take one car maybe that had a special problem, take it over there and build it up, tear it down several times, but when we started up, every employee had seen what his job was, and every foreman, it was miserable for him. It was so much more enjoyable when he started the new model up.
At least he had a chance.
He had a chance. He knew how to do it. But see, they even stopped that on the end job. They built that big pilot. See, that was the last thing I was involved in. It was just Rucker was appointed in general manager, and he told him he wanted a $500,000 pilot area, and which was, I mean, right out of the blue sky, and it's all right. The pilot thing may have turned out all right, but I would still have insisted that the people build it on the line, and somehow if they had and later on that was a problem, because they went up to learn learn their job, and they don't fool around up there. You don't have somebody gets all the parts, they have all the information, but so it did turn out to be somewhat of a problem, especially on a brand new car. But that's about it.
One other thing, who do you think in all those years was the most interesting boss you worked for?
Oh, well, interesting. See, Slatka and Mooney were two different. There were
Yeah.
two people that, tremendous people. Mooney had, I think, brain-wise, he was out ahead of everybody. The guy had so damn much, even though he was hard to handle or anything else, he knew when to get off things, and he could discipline himself, even though he was in a tantrum he kept his brain working all the time. I know, Bill, I just had all kinds of respect for him. Uh, Bill got into some times when he fought with the wrong people. He was right, and it was what should have been done. But but as far as assembly knowing the in-plant thing, Bill was probably the best. Mooney was, from an intellectual standpoint, able to comprehend all that stuff, even though he didn't put his hands on it. And he could grab grassroots things so easily that used to bug me. And the darn guy, even though he was a brilliant guy, we'd get down on something, we'd just, and he'd say, well, Harold Cutler said this or that, and so I'd say, oh, God, Harold, I'll go back it. And he would put a lot of importance on it. It amazed me, even though he didn't think that greatly of the individual, he said, well, now the guy's been around and he's got an opinion, and you better respect it. And in some of those cases, something come out of the thing by slowing us down and making sure you at least look at what don't turn the guy on. But he gave a lot of, which is really amazed me. Even though he'd be way ahead, as some person that had a lot of experience someplace, even though we all thought he didn't know much, if he made a comment, Mooney had put that on the table and absolutely would not throw it out, which was interesting too, that he gave that he didn't see anything in so much in anything in the statement, but thought the person, because he had that background, was worthy of critiquing it good. And many times, that's what Cordes used to say. He says, Mooney's so damn far ahead of the rest of us, he gets unhappy with it. He sees it before we do. But he was certainly certainly a different kind of a character. You could hate him, or you could like him, or you could, and many times he'd make you just mad intentionally. But no, Bill Slack and either one of that. Bill was such a straight shooter and straight arrow guy, even though, you thought the guy came out playing women around there and booze around there and everything. Bill was straight arrow, and he had, although he'd let you think he was, if you talked to him or something, you might think it, but he really kept his head on his shoulder, and he wouldn't do anything, and politically, he wasn't that, he wasn't for his own benefit. But those two guys were sharp.
Well, that's good, Jack. That's great.
But it was a different world when hackers came here. I don't want to get into that.
There's another interesting individual.
There's the first 2 years, it was horrible. Absolutely the worst year I've ever seen in my life. By the end of that first year at the operating meeting, when he got promoted to Canada, everybody, it's just But it was a different, it was part of power management. I call it power management.
Mhm.
It was, I'm say it, you do it, and he got the power by talking about how his friendship to Jim McDonald, he'd come in here with it, but every damn other word, he'd say, "Oh, I was over to Jim McDonald swimming in the swimming pool the other day." Right. And and Cook used to say, "You were." I mean, he and the Cook fellow, he had a route around him. It was so funny that I watched that interplay go on, and it was so funny. And at the operating meeting, he wouldn't let anybody talk in the operating meeting. Just everybody across each shut up. The operating meeting went from a 2-hour meeting down to a 20-minute or half an hour meeting, and then and it was you could have sent the information out on a piece of paper. Those early operating meetings where there was a lot of good information exchange. A lot of people talked a lot, but it still was a damn good meeting because you had everybody there, and but it became just a one-way conversational thing later. But anyhow. Oh, I got the date, damn you pretty near got your time in, Jim.
That's all right.
Yeah.